Good morning. It is a good morning, isn't it? We were singing that song, I'll Fly Away, and Stacy said it's a good thing we don't have to drive away. And so, I don't know if you've heard about some of our adventures over the last couple of weeks. We haven't had very good luck with transportation, and I was looking over the sermon that I had prepared for this morning, and I'm just not really into it this morning. And so, maybe I will share with you some of the things that I have been thinking about over the last few days, and let me just give you sort of a picture of some of the things that we have been dealing with over the last week and a half. A week and a half ago, we received word that one of my uncles had passed on. So we were able to go up and be with the family at the funeral last week, and then on the way back, as we were coming back, I was with my parents, and we were in their van, and it broke down on the way home in Columbus, and we called AAA. I was fortunate we had AAA; they'll come out and tow us, and of course they weren't able to come out and tow us, and so they said we won't be able to get to it till the following day. I thought, what are we going to do? And I thought, well, maybe I'll call Stacy. Maybe she's still at work, and fortunately she was. So she came out and got us, and we were actually able to make it home. What was happening was the vehicle was overheating, and so we would put a little bit of coolant in, let it drive for 30 minutes, and wait for it to cool down and put a little bit more until we finally got all the way home. And then what happened next? We went down to Kansas on Thursday, and I didn't realize my car is parked right outside of the window, so you can see the results of what happened over here. But I met a deer that day, and he did a real number on my vehicle. We were on our way to a court hearing for my son. Fortunately, we did make it on time, and I guess I was by myself, wasn't I? Yeah, that's right. I was by myself, wasn't I? Stacy says she's probably going to not let me drive anywhere for a while. So, but I wasn't able to finish the trip in that car, and my daughter-in-law came and got us to where we needed to go. And it just seemed like it was just one thing. What else happened? Oh, we had another death in the family. One of my 20-year-old nephews on Stacy's side, totally unexpected head-on collision, and we weren't able to go down for the funeral. And it just seemed like it has just been one thing after another. And somebody said, it could have been worse. And I said, well, yeah, I guess it could have been worse. It doesn't make me feel a lot better, but I guess it could have been worse. But I've been thinking about and going back and looking at the book of Philippians. And I don't know if you know much about the book of Philippians, but the theme, if there's one word to describe the theme of the book of Philippians, it's probably the word joy. And so it's a man that is actually in prison talking all about joy. And so I've been kind of thumbing through and reminding myself of some of the things that are in the book of Philippians. In fact, let's go ahead and read some of those. First chapter of Philippians, verse 12. And here we have a description of the situation that Paul, who was writing this letter, of the situation that he's in. Verse 12, he writes, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do it out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I am in chains. But what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached, and because of this, I rejoice. Yes, and I will continue to rejoice. And so, even though I have never been thrown in prison before, I've never spent a day in jail, but here is a man who's been thrown in prison for doing the right thing, for doing good. And here he is talking about rejoicing. Here he is talking about joy. Here he is with a different perspective on his difficulty than I've been dealing with over the last few days. He says in chapter 2 and verse 12, "Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God, without fault in a warped and crooked generation." Without grumbling. You know, I didn't realize over the last few days I was talking about having a good attitude about everything and not snapping. And, my wife is already starting to snicker. Because I said that, and she looks at me like, with her eye like that. It's like, what? Evidently, I had been snapping. Evidently, I haven't had a very good attitude about the things that have been going on. And I didn't notice it, but I guess evidently, well, your spouse always notices more than you, don't they? And so in chapter 4, here's this reminder. Chapter 4 and verse 4. "Rejoice in the Lord always, and I will say it again, rejoice." And I'm reminded, it doesn't say rejoice when things are going well. It just says to rejoice in the Lord at all times. Always focus on your joy in the Lord. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. The Lord is near. You know, no matter what happens, no matter what tragedy you face in your life, no matter what difficulty you face in your life, the Lord is near. And I had forgotten about that. I was so focused on what was going on, I wasn't focused on the fact that God is with me through all of this. Do not be anxious about anything. In other words, don't worry excessively. Don't worry about things that you have no control over. Don't worry about things that you cannot change. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. With thanksgiving, present your request to God. It says something about the disposition we should have even when we're making a request to God. And then it says, "And the peace of God which transcends all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." In other words, you won't be overcome by pessimism. You won't be overcome by bitterness. You won't be overcome by all of these negative things that take your minds off of the things which are really important that we have in life. Verse 8, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." Did you hear that? Let your mind dwell on these things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice. Everything he was demonstrating about rejoicing even in prison, this is the same disposition you should have. "And the God of peace will be with you." And then it goes on and says, "I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need." I think if you were in prison, you might be in need, especially in those days, because it's not like prisons nowadays. If you had what you need, it's because people came and brought it to you. They didn't provide those necessities oftentimes in prison, so people literally could starve to death. But he says, "I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've been on both sides of the fence. I have learned the secret of being content in any in every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through Him. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. Focus on our Lord. Focus on Jesus. Focus on, that puts everything into perspective. And I was thinking about that. My grandmother used to say, who's going to care about this 100 years from now? But I think when we look at it from a Christian perspective, who's going to care about this in eternity? These things, when you get past them and you look back on them, are going to seem so petty. And yet, these small things, I allow them to snap at the ones that I love. I allow them to change my disposition toward those who are important to me. And then when years go by, I'm going to ask myself, why in the world did I allow that to happen? I need to do as the text says here. Focus on the things which are excellent, the things that are lovely, the things that are beautiful, the things that are positive. Oh, how fortunate it was that when we broke down that Stacy was actually able to come out and rescue us and bring us home. How fortunate it was that when I met the deer on the highway that I didn't get hurt. How fortunate it was to have Dave and Stacy be able to rescue me from that situation, to be able to help me to be able to get back home. How fortunate it was when I met with my son and when he had his hearing in court that everything went well and that the family is still together. And how fortunate to have all these offers of, hey, if you don't have any wheels, why don't I've got an extra set of wheels to loan you. And the list just can go on and on. There is more good than there is bad in life. And I think if we continue to focus on this, then I know for myself that helps to put everything into the proper perspective. And I know that at some point in life, Jesus is going to return. And all of this will be done and over with. And we don't have to worry about driving to heaven. Like the song says, we'll fly away with Him. We'll meet Him in the air and go to be with Him. So I want you to think about those things. And I don't often do this shoot from the hip. I think I can remember doing this one time when I got it in the pulpit, shooting from the hip. But this is really what has been on my mind, and I thought I would share that with you. And hopefully you've been blessed by it in some way. So at this point, we'll go ahead and sing the invitation song. So think about these things as we sing.